And we are now live.
Okay, Director Douglas, are you ready to begin the meeting?
I am.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us. Pursuant to Community Charter Section 166, Council must undertake a process of public consultation regarding the proposed financial plan before it is adopted. So welcome to the Community Budget Meeting for the 2020 fiscal year for the District of Sechelt. Director of Finance Dave Douglas will provide an overview of the draft operational and capital budgets and will be taking questions at the end of his presentation. We have members of the public joining us through the Zoom online meeting platform, some from their computers and some by phone. We ask that you hold your questions until the end of the presentation. Everyone is automatically muted when they join the Zoom meeting. If you have logged in online, there are 3 ways you can ask a question. You may use the raise hand feature at the bottom of your Zoom screen, and we will call on you to ask your question verbally. Or you can type your question into the Q&A section of the Zoom window. You can also send an email to councilmeetings@sechelt.ca. For people joining with a telephone line only, please use the shortcut *9 to raise your virtual hand if you have a question following the presentation. And with that, I hand it over to Director Douglas.
Thank you, Carrie Ann. I'd like to thank everybody for coming today to watch a presentation of the 2020 to 2024 5-year financial plan. My name is Dave Douglas, and I'm the Director of Finance with the District of Sechelt. Most of my comments will be about 2020. I will discuss some trends going outward when we look at the 5-year financial plan, but my main information will center around the 2020 budget. So today we'll be going through the 2020 general operating operations, the 2020 general capital and projects. We will then look at the sewer operations for 2020, the 2020 sewer capital and projects. We're going to just take a quick review of the 2020 5-year financial plan in consolidation. We have a couple of tax samples for everybody to take a look at, providing a little bit of summary and then a question period at the end. So into the general operating fund. So the general operating fund is our largest fund. We have two operating funds, a sewer operating fund and a general operating fund. The general operating fund is really where most of the common services are budgeted for, and where we bring in the revenue and we hold the expenses. Some of the areas that are included in the general operating fund are the airport, administration, arts and culture, building inspection, building maintenance, bylaw enforcement, communications, corporate services, community grants, economic development, engineering, financial services, human resources, information services, IT, library is budgeted there, line painting of their public works, roads, sidewalks, drainage, mayor, council is all budgeted in this area, parks, planning, RCMP, risk management, solid waste, street sweeping, and wards. So this is the first look at the 5-year financial plan for the general operating fund. And I have a little pen here I'll try and use as I'm talking about different areas. And the first one we're going to look at here is property taxation. And that would be the 2020 property taxation. And the increased lift there is overall is just over $500,000, $553,000, of which 57,000 is new construction, and the remainder is due to the 3.8% increase in taxation. As a trend going out to 2011 and 12, we're still a heavy reliance on taxation for probably the next 2 years, and that's the trend that we're showing here. And then as we go further, the trend towards taxation, still an increase to taxation, but at a lesser degree. Due to the COVID-19 situation, this budget looks significantly different today than it did a month ago. And so many things were pushed out from 2020 into 2021. And so we have captured some of those, we've captured them for now for planning purposes in 2021, but council will review and sit on the 2021 budget next year. But for now, some of the things that we had initially included here are now sitting out here. Okay, so the fees and charges, you can see that the fees and charges have come down. A little bit from 2019 to 2020, about for $50,000. And a lot of this is centered around, you know, our biggest revenue sources are probably from building inspection, from planning, and from engineering. And we are planning that those revenues will be down this year. And going out forward, we're still not, you know, seeing a huge recovery in 2021, but starting to come back in 2022 with a little bit more of an increase there. Just going to read a few lines here. Okay, investment income. We have our investment income has actually been budgeted quite a bit less than what our actual was last year. I think our actual was just over $300,000 in investment income. This year we're budgeting $240,000, and the remainder of this is actuarial interest that we get from our MFA loans. So 240 from our actual interest and 220 from our actuarial interest from MFA. And going out really a similar level next year. I mean, interest rates were pretty good to start the year from what they have been in the last number of years, but they have now dipped down. And so we are expecting, you know, that to last throughout this year and probably most of next year. And then you can see that the trend here is that investment revenue is slowly climbing in 2022 and 2023. And our actuarial investments will end in later in the middle of 2023, I believe. Looking at our grants and donations, these are standard grants. This area, there's two areas for grants. We have this area here and the one down here. Sorry about my circles. But the grants up here are standard grants. So this would be the gas tax grant coming in, as well as the small community grant. Additionally, this year we're getting a small provincial grant of $200,000 for a project that we're working on as well. And then you can see the trend is that will be just come down to the two granting areas, which is once again the gas tax and the small community grant. Other revenue, although we've increased that budget by about 14 grand this year, the trend going out here is showing that it still stays flat over the next number of years. DCCs, really we use the DCCs to fund our capital. And so we will be showing you a little bit more information on the DCCs for the general operating fund in the capital section. But what you can see here is there is a significant reliance on using DCCs this year. a little bit less next year, but then another heavy reliance in 2022. And what the majority of this DCC here is for this year is Trail Avenue, from both a road perspective and drainage. So we're utilizing some funds from DCCs for that project from those two DCCs. And further down my list here, we have grant contributions. And so these are actually grants that we apply for capital and for capital purposes. And so the majority of this grant for 2020 is for the airport runway extension. And then you can see that we have a smaller reliance next year on grants. Often grants are fairly current. We probably would never, not very often or never be applying for a grant 3 or 4 years out. Usually when you apply, they're 2, 3 years planning, maybe 3, but mostly 1 and 2 year planning out.
David, we do have a question in the gallery just specifying, can you specify what DCC stands for?
I'm sorry, thank you. DCCs are development cost charges, and these DCCs we collect from developers when they do subdivisions or other large works within the community. Thank you for the question. Okay, so on to general operating fund expenditures here. And once again, we'll really be focusing here on the 2020 numbers. In 2020, we see an increase in our expenditures of $386,000. Just open my page. And this is where we're, part of this lift is from the $200,000 grant we're getting from the government. This is where we're spending the 200, and the remainder is really summarized through increases to a host of different things, including wages and some contracts, and we'll be going through a list a little bit later showing the kinds of things that are increased in here. Going out further, the increases slow down a little bit over the next number of years in the general government area. So that's the trend going outward. Planning and development, budgeted very close to last year, $4,000 difference from one year to the next. That would just be basically, some salaries and wages and contract work. You'll see that there's a decline. The trend here is a decline here. And that's because we had planned in both this year and in 2019 to do some work on some bylaws. And so we're anticipating that, we are funding it now, and we're going to start working on these bylaws. And we're expecting that we'll be through them next year. And if we're not, then we will talk about that next year. But the trend is to come down in these expenses over the next number of years, and they'll slowly climb up as we go forward. Community services, you're looking at a $909,000 increase. And so let me take a peek here. And that's primarily, this one here is so at the last council meeting, council endorsed $50,000 to go to COVID relief in the community. And so that's where that's budgeted. And so the remainder of that increase is just due to salaries, wages, and other small increases throughout the budget. And the trend here is to keep this, fairly flat. There's where the grant comes out next year, so that 50,000 doesn't show there, and slowly this budget line increases over the next 4 years. Facilities increase there of 63,000. We have some work that we really need to do on our facilities. These are need to do, not necessarily nice to have. There might be one nice to have, but we're utilizing and renting our facilities out quite a bit more now, and so we have to keep an eye on the level of maintenance that we're doing. So this year shows a bit of an increase in our facilities costs. Also this year we're doing getting an assessment done on our facilities, so we'll be able to budget this here better next year, but for now it reduces and then really shows small increases throughout the remainder of the 4 years. Police services increase of $91,000. Part of that is the RCMP contract. The other part of it is that we moved our victim services contract from grants out to be within the police services budget. So although this shows $91,000 to police services, the contract portion of this was only $23,000. And solid waste, we've been working on a plan to increase the solid waste services within the district of Sechelt, and within this budget area, as there's an increase here of 130. The increase is due to the fact that we're going from a two pickup system, which is garbage and recycling, to include garbage, recycling, and organics. And although that will come later in the year, we had to budget for, we budgeted initially for a number of months, and our aim is to get that going as soon as possible. And the trend going outward is to maintain those services over the 4 years going outward. So this is once again the general operating fund, and this is what I call the capital debt and funding area of the 5-year financial plan. And this is where we house our amortization, and our amortization or depreciation each year usually changes if we add an asset, a building, or if we add equipment, or if we add some major maintenance, depreciation will go up. When it comes to debt servicing, we have some debt, and I'm just going to drop out of this cell, and you can see down here we're looking at taking on a little bit more debt this year and again next year. So you would expect to see the trend of debt to go upward over the next 4 years, of which it does. And then later in 2023, we have a debt that is ending. So then it drops back down at that point. So this would be inclusive of the payments from this year here, and this would be inclusive of payments of the debt that we take on next year. Transfers to and from reserves, we'll go through more of the transfers from reserves a little bit later, but the transfers we have going into reserves, we have the gas tax funds goes into a reserve annually, as well as this year, just over $700,000 goes into a capital reserve. And this is to house the money until we need it for capital purchases. And as you'll find out a little later, that we'll be utilizing quite a number of those reserves this year for work that we need to do. And then jumping down here to capital purchases, we're budgeting for this year $13 million in capital purchases for 2020. And next year, you can see that we're at the 7.8 million. And as we go out, 6.7 million, 2.6 million, and 2.5 million. So now we're going to talk more about 2020 and what's included in this budget. We've just finished the year-end process with our auditors, and what came through that process is a list of projects that we had budgeted for last year, but did not either finish or get started, or we got partway through. And so these are items that are not a new tax for this year. This was taxed for last year, or you can see there's a number of grants that were carried over from one year to the next. And so these are projects that will be worked on this year, and the expectation would be to either finish them or get well through them. So we have the sewer modeling, which is an engineering project for 108,000. Bylaw 430, another engineering project, 48,000. Child care planning, I believe this is a grant that came through that we have $2,500 remaining. Records management, we plan to do $10,000 last year, records management filing, and we're carrying that forward to this coming year. OCP update, we budgeted 80 grand last year, so we're just carrying that forward. Then we have a couple of arts grants here for a total of about $20,000. Suncoaster Trail, this is also a grant from BC Rural Dividend. Remaining is $19,000. And Selma Park, Davis Bay Sewer Functional Plan, carry forward of $19,000. So this is a list of new projects that are in the 2020 budget, and so these would be current taxation would be paying for these up to $107,100. And so we are adding. We have an engineer vacant position currently, and we have increased our budget for that by $10,000 this year. Our parks washrooms, I think in the past were cleaned on not a very regular schedule, and so the recommendation was to clean them on a more regular schedule. So we budgeted $8,900 for that. Once again, parks power tailgate for the parks vehicle, budgeted at $6,000. This is the building bylaw review for $7,000. The bylaw is the building world is changing, and we need to update our building bylaw, and we put some money aside for that. Then we have some improvements to a couple of our buildings that we need to do. The Rockwood Lodge, we need a couple maintenance items there, a hot water tank, and some other work done on the outside. Records management, we're increasing that budget by $5,000. Stacking chairs and tables at the Seaside Center. As I said, we're really working on increasing the usage of the Seaside Center as well as some of our other buildings, and the demand for certain items has come into play here with the chairs and tables. We applied for 2 planning grants and received them. One's a water conservation planning grant for $50,000. The grant is $10,000, but it's a $15,000 total project, and a reclaimed water planning grant. Once again, $10,000 for the grant, and the total project is $15,000. Our next slide is showing where the increases and decreases throughout the budget are, the 2020 budget, in more detail. I call it by object code. So it's more like, you know, interest and salaries and benefits and, you know, bylaw revenue or a certain revenue, as well as insurance and things like that. So this is just showing the increases in a different way. So salary and benefits rode the budget, $87,000 increase. RCMP contract, $23,000. Debt interest, no change there at this point. Contingency, we decreased contingency by $25,000 over last year. Hydro increased 45,000 to 11. The library grant was decreased this year by 7,700. We have taken our contracts with IT has gone up by 48,000 this year. We also are using at least one new software, if not more. So that would be one of the reasons for that. Our grant revenue increased this year, so that's a good thing there. That's the 200,000 from the province that I talked about a little earlier. Reduction in anticipated work revenue, so we're looking at our revenues and a little bit of reduction there. We saw an increase in fuel last year at the airport in sales, so we're keeping that very close to the number last year. Our sales revenue, we are expecting to be down by $166,000. We are starting to put money aside. So every 4 years we have an election, and so the election costs us around $30,000. And so every year we're going to put $7,500 into a reserve so that we are not taxing in 1 year for a $30,000 election. You know, it keeps the revenue stream more constant, and property taxation, we're saying going up $410,000. New construction, part of that is $47,000, and the remainder of, I had it written down here. One moment. Yeah, new construction was 57,000 and 353,000 increase due to the 3.8% increase to taxation. On your slides, if you saw this online or printed this off online, there should be brackets around this number, and I apologize for that. Yours probably does not have brackets. So then the next area is penalties and interest on taxes. We decreased this budget area by $58,000. We are not in for several reasons, and we'll talk about that near the end of the presentation. We're changing our penalty dates in the district. Although the residential one will be on the same day as it has been, the commercial will be different, and we'll go through that in a bit. Cost of goods sold, increase of $20,000. Part of this is the fuel at the airport. Traffic fine revenue, we're expecting, we've seen a decrease in the traffic fine revenue. Legal fees, we're budgeting $50,000 more over last year. Insurance, we saw a small increase of $4,500 over last year. And we're seeing a small increase in our revenue from the RCMP and justice revenue. And our business license revenue, we're budgeting a tiny bit less this year as well, $5,000 less. Equipment rental, small equipment purchases, we're budgeting less for that this year. MFA actuarial income, we're budgeting a little bit less for that as well, 18 grand. Community grants given out, it's showing an $86,000 increase, but included in here is that $50,000 one-time COVID relief. And we had a further increase to community grants. So the next one here is building inspection revenues. We're budgeting $120,000 less from last year. The three areas are, which is sewer, building, and planning. The revenues are down, and so we must budget for them in an appropriate way. We've decreased our training through the budget by $25,000. And this was largely due to, really came in the last month, where a lot of our conferences and a lot of our training was being canceled due to the current condition going across the world and province and locally. So we're seeing an increase of contribution from the solid waste of $40,000. This year we started receiving funds from Recycle BC, and so that will go to offset some of our increases to the solid waste program that we're looking to implement. And we're not anticipating having to increase our fees at this point for the increase in garbage service. Planning and engineering fees down $25,000 over last year. Interest income down $15,000. We're budgeting. Oh, we're increasing that by $15,000. Primarily due to the fact that we do have a little more reserves this year than we had in the past. And so although the interest rate is down, our reserve balances are up a little bit. Communications, an increase by $5,000. So the next one is supplies, publications, and courier, and $100,000 increase. And so looking deeper into this, we also have, this one's quite a widespread capture. It has salt from Public Works, which increased by, into the 20,000s, and increase in other Public Works materials and supplies, as well as office supplies. So yeah, we have to fund our salt purchases and road patching to a level that makes sense for the community. We don't want to get caught short. And if we don't make the purchases, then the money will stick around either for next year, or it'll go into a reserve if we don't spend it. Debt principal showing a decrease of $12,000 here. Transfers to capital, increase of $14,000. Transfer into reserves into reserves, another $7,000. So one's a capital reserve and the other one's reserves of $77,000. And contracted services increase of $11,000 throughout the budget. So this is all your revenue up and down, and the end result should be zero, and that's what it is right here. So general capital projects, we'll take a review of general capital. And I've summarized these into 7 headings. There's quite a list to go through. And so vehicles purchases, we're looking at $310,000 this year. And that's would be replacing of 3 vehicles and bringing in 1 new piece of equipment for parks. Parks and community infrastructure. So these are improvements to so the dog park would be part of this one, and other community infrastructure. Facilities, 4.5 million, and the majority of this one would be the increase to the airport runway, which we've applied for significant grants for. You'll see that the facilities is up again next year, and this one is mainly the public works building that we're planning for down the road. Information technology, $167,000. Drainage work, most of that would be on Trail Avenue. There is other drainage work, but to smaller extent. Roads, so this would be mostly Trail Avenue, budgeted here, being paid mostly by development cost charges. And we have applied for another grant with regards to sidewalks and walkways. And so that's budgeted here. And of course, if we don't get the grant, that won't go ahead. So this is how we're breaking down the funding for that 13 million in capital. So capital reserves, $1.5 million. MFA financing, 245,000 this year. Gas tax reserve, 1.1 million. Public safety, 197,000. Development cost charges, 6.1 million. And that's, like I said earlier, that would be roads and drainage. DCCs, or development cost charges. General surplus, 118,000. Public works reserve, and this is for the design and starting the building for public works yard. And grants and contributions, $3.7 million. Going out next year, just look at, we are planning to borrow next year, and this would be for the build of the public works yard. And as you can see, the trend here is we do have fairly high reliance on our development cost charges. And so although we're doing Trail Avenue phase 1 here, we're budgeting for it here in 2 years. And so that's an ongoing project for the district. So what are some of the projects? Like I said, the list is fairly extensive. So I brought forward a list of some of the larger items. We have Trail Avenue. We're doing roads, sidewalks, storm and curbing on Trail Avenue. Airport runway, there's 2 phases that are being planned there and 2 grant applications that are in. Phase 1 and phase 2, Wakefield culvert replacement, Wharf Avenue sidewalk. We've budgeted for some major maintenance on district buildings to bring them up to be, the envelopes to be a little stronger than they are now. We are starting the process on the public works building. We have a bike lane project going on in town. Vehicle replacements, 3, 1 new vehicle. Computer equipment replacements. We have condition assessment on district buildings, and I've got this one in twice, so I'll take that out. So now we're going to jump over to the sewer operating and capital. And what's included in this budget area is the Water Resource Center, the Dusty Road pretreatment plant, or what we call Septage, the entire collection system, which includes approximately 50 kilometers of underground sanitary sewer piping, 9 lift stations, and an outfall that goes to the ocean. So this year we're looking at increasing our user fees by, it is a significant amount, we realize that. So we're trying to bring in 542,000 more funds to address some very critical issues that we need to have completed this year. And we're going to go through that list in a few minutes. So that would bring total revenue of just over 2 million from user fees. And the trend showing here is that, we are going to be looking at another year of, increases to the user fees. And then in 2022 outward, it slows down a little bit in its increasing. Parcel taxes were leaving the same as last year in their values. Septage, so this is mainly a septage revenue in here. And so we are looking at increasing our septage significantly, again, $207,000 this year. And it'll be more next year. We're getting 6 months of a lift this year and then the whole 12 months next year. And then just budgeting investment income for the reserves and for the surplus that is held in the sewer operating fund. Once again, these are transfers from the development cost charge reserve. We're planning on using some of that for sewer this year and onward. Reliance. The reliance seems to get heavier as we go further. So we're dropping our reliance on development cost charges in 2021 and 2022, and then increase again in 2023 and 4. Our capital, we're budgeting, from grants. We've applied for several grants. Actually, one grant in particular, and this is to do the Wakefield pump station or lift station. It's in a position that it needs to get done. And so we have applied for a grant there. If we do not get the grant, we need to move forward with this project no matter what. So if the grant doesn't come through, we will do an amendment bylaw that would move our portion of that project to borrowing. Okay. So now we're looking at the sewer operating fund expenses and sewer admin, just a $32,000 increase here. Collection, quite a bit more of a lift here, but it's not necessarily all new money here. We have taken some of the salaries that used to be in the treatment area, and we've moved them up to reflect the time that our staff are using or working in the collection system. Prior years, most of our salaries were just collected down here in the treatment center, but we deploy our staff and we weren't really capturing what the true cost of collection was. So this is an attempt to start working towards capturing our actual costs of the collection. And then treatment. The other thing that made the rise here was you'll see that there's a list coming up of some work that we need to do on the collection system. And so that would have increased the budget there too. The treatment plant here, two things. We've added one FTE to the sewer treatment and collection system, so that person's wages is split between the two. But more importantly, there's a number of items that need to be taken care of at the treatment plant. It's 5 years old now. It's showing some wear on whether it be motors or some of the other equipment that's there, and they're at a point that they need to be replaced. So we've increased this budget to that. Septage receiving, just a small increase here, mainly due to a study that we need to do with disposing of solids that are coming out of the pond in the next, well, it came out last year and will come out again in next year as well. And okay, then we move on to what I call the capital funding and debt. Capital funding, comma there, and debt. And we have borrowing on the Water Resource Center, so that continues for a number of more years. I think it ends in 2025. And as you can see, we're going to be borrowing this year. And so next year we're budgeting for the expenses for the principal payments for that. Again, next year we're looking at borrowing another $350,000, and you'll see an increase here in 2022 for the principal payments there. So that's the trend here in debt payments going upwards for a couple of years. We are planning to do $1.7 million in capital in the sewer operating fund, and we'll go through that list here in a minute. But majority of that is the Wakefield lift station that I talked about previously. And the trend here going outwards is again similar level of capital next year, and then slowly coming down a bit, and then increasing again in 2024. So included in the 2020 budget for sewer is two things. Things we'll call one-time costs. They're new, and these are tax or user fee related revenues that will pay for this. And so, so these are new one-time costs. Liquid waste management planning, $40,000. Pumps for emergency response, $8,500. We need to do a little electrical work on our Norwest Bay Road lift station for $15,000. Dusty Road solids handling inquiry. So this is that $20,000 that I talked about in the septage area. We need to find out how and where and when we can dispose of those. Outfall, we're doing an inspection on our outfall, and that's $20,000. Diffuser replacement. This is one of those things that is worn out and we need to do this year. And then going forward, it's usually every 3 or 4 years, this will need to be done again. And so we'll start a reserve next year and put little bits away every year so that it doesn't cost us a lot in 1 year. And spare parts for lift stations for $12,000, and just some software update for our water resource center for $6,000. The next little section here is new costs that we have, and they're going to be ongoing. So they're not one time only. They are going to be annual, and so we need to build them into the budget. And so spare valves and for the water resource center, this will be ongoing, $13,000. Gas detection, flow servicing, $5,000 annually. Greenhouse maintenance, $6,000. We've added a new full-time person at the water into the sewer operating fund. Who'll work both in collections and at the water resource center for $72,000. Headwork service, $23,000 will be an annual. HVAC boiler service requirements and inspection, $9,000. Blower service, $10,000, and servicing of odor control system, $14,000. So that's a total of $327,000. So once again, just looking at the changes by object now, like we did at the general operating fund. Sewer revenues, we're looking at an increase of $807,000. Now this is for both. This is both the septage area and our sewer rates, user rates. Salaries and benefits up 154. Now that's inclusive of a new person in this budget. Transfers, okay, transfers to sewer debt, interest, $16,000 decrease here as we pay down our loan. Hydro training, we have some highly trained individuals at our treatment plant, and they must retain their level of certification. So it's a list of $12,000. Hydro, $2,000 increase. Contracted services. This is where most of those funds are we spent that that list we went through, 211,000. The other one that goes up will be supplies, because part of that list was supplies. So that goes up 122. And insurance came down a little bit here, $1,100. So just a quick review of where our fees are going. Our fees, we're going to be putting a bylaw forward to council that fees will be, user fees for the sewer fund will go to $494,000. Sorry, can I say that again? $494 per resident, and that's a $123 increase. Senior citizens apartment rate is going to go to $304, which is a $76 increase. And the commercial rate, there's various commercial rates, but I've plucked one out of the bylaw here, and it's going up to $1,041, which is a $261 increase. Parcel taxes will remain at $274 per resident or per property. So why? So we talked about some important issues that we need to deal with regards to the Water Resource Center and the collection system, and we are significantly increasing the fees to Dusty Road, to the septage area. And the reason is because down the road, coming up very quickly, we have a lot of costs that are going to hit us. And, we believe the septage system should be independent of the rest of the sewer system. We have people that are dropping off septage to be treated there. And so it should be funding itself from a full cycle perspective, from receiving to treatment to disposal. And currently it's not. And so that's why we're looking at increasing the fees here. And so some of the costs that we know are coming up is the septage sewer disposal. So this is disposal of the septage that we're digging out of the lagoons, upwards of $500,000 to dispose of that. Removal of solids from the lagoon. So this is the actual digging out the lagoons, $200,000. And we've put this in by year. So next year we're looking at $500,000, 2022, 200,000. We want to do a site closure plan or remediation plan in 2022 for 150,000. And then because we're in 2022, we're going to do another dig out of the lagoons. Then 2 years later, 2024, we would be looking to dispose of those solids at another $500,000. So that's the reason for it. And so our charges currently are 23 cents per imperial gallon, or $50.60 per cubic meter, going up to 51 cents per imperial gallon, or $112.18 per cubic meter. We do realize that is a jump, but we also feel it should be self-funding. So this is how will play out over the next 2 years. So this would be the revenues for 2020, and this is based on 6 months. Previously, council got the annual look at it because that's where we're going. So with this year, you're looking at 520 of revenues. This is the cost from the operating area, and looking at this year, we'd be moving 363,000 into a reserve, Septage Receiving reserve. And once we see the 12 months of the increase, we'd be putting $534,000 into the reserve to capture the plans for these costs going forward. And this is the number the council has seen before here. So sewer capital, so we're budgeting $1.7 million. The funding is coming from sewer capital reserve 18,000. Development cost charges of 427,000. User fees 192,000. Grants 638. Now this, like I said earlier, this is primarily for the Wakefield lift station, and if this grant does not come through, we need to do this project. So we'll bring that back through to council. MFA financing, $500,000. So these are the projects here that we're budgeting for that make up the 1.7 million. The filter test bath, 18,000. Camera inspecting of the mains, 8,000. And repairing our outfall. We need some necessary work done on our outfall out to the ocean. We're estimating that at $500,000. Additional membranes at the treatment plant for 96,000. A roof replacement at the Dusty Road building for 12,000. The Wakefield pump station, $870,000, and Trail Avenue Force Main, $200,000. So, summary of the sewer operations. The sewer operating fund is underfunded at this point, and we need to make steps to increase our revenues to be able to have a self-sustaining fund here. There is critical work we need to do in 2020 and 2021. Significant increase to septage fees and proposed increases to the sewer user fees as well to pay for this critical work. $1.7 million of capital plan in 2020, and the addition of one full-time equivalent is included in the budget. So I'm just going to breeze through the consolidated 5-year financial plan, but because it's accumulation of the sewer and general together. It's inclusive of everything I've talked about so far, but when the bylaw comes to council, it will look like this. It'll be consolidated with all the sewer and the general combined onto one bylaw, and it's just provided here for so we start to get used to what it looks like. The intention here when we consolidate it is to make it very similar to what our financial statements look like in consolidation, so that a reader of our annual audited statements and the budget will mesh a lot better. And so it's easier to follow, an actual audited statements to your budget, to your consolidated budget. And so, like I said, I don't intend to speak too much more to this as we've been through all the items. So now I have just a quick topic, class multiples and property tax rates. So this is our assessed values that we received from BC Assessment for the District of Sechelt by class. And the middle column is our tax rate, and which generate so this is our tax rate that we're planning on that will get us the revenues that we need for the general operating fund. And really these rates here are essentially last year's dollar value plus new construction plus 3.8% gives us these values throughout our taxing. And as a result of that, this is what our class multiples will end up at for this year. So everything is related back to residential. So your residential is always a 1. And the one class multiple that's been a hot topic over the years is the business class multiple. And it was 2.39% last year. But when you add the new construction and the 3.8%, it drops a little bit this year to 2.23 to 1 residential. So that means they pay 2.23 times what a residence pays for taxes. The other thing that I wanted just to bring up is that the residential taxable value came down for residents this year. It was almost a 5% decrease over the previous year, while business assessments grew or went up. And that's all due to market conditions from year to year. And that is one of the reasons why the class multiple changed this year. But overall, the residents will be paying 85% of tax revenues for the year. Small portions from utilities, light industry, business, 12.1%, and managed forests, very small, recreation, very small, and farm, even less. So I have some property tax samples, 1 residential property and 1 commercial. And so really, you know, what I'm trying to show here is where you were last year on a property that was valued at $679,000 last year. It lost a little bit of value from one year to the next. And so the taxes and water and sewer and garbage will cost you $51.86 this year, which is a $246 increase over last year. So if you go through them all, school increases a little bit. Municipality, $78, SCRD, $27, recreation, $27 down, fire protection, $11 increase, sewer, $123, and water parcel, $14. Then on a commercial property, so once again, this property that was worth $900,000 last year increased in value a little bit over last year. So you expect to see it pay a little bit more than last year. However, the province this year is giving school tax relief to all the class 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8 for this year. One-time only relief for school tax. So in the end, that's a $1,600 decrease for this property. Our taxes for municipality will go up $156, SCRD $161, fire protection $76, sewer user fees $261, water parcel $14. So overall, last year this property paid $12,500 in taxation, and this year will pay almost $1,000 less, and that's all due to the school tax, pretty much. $11,500, a $975 decrease. So really, the bigger thing with the community and the situation that's going on out there is that our tax due date will still remain as July 2nd. However, council will be receiving a bylaw that changes the penalty dates for both residential and commercial or business. The first penalty date will stay the same at July 3rd and will be the 5% that we have had in the past. The second due date has changed from August 31st to October 1st will be the next penalty date. So you have till September 30th to pay the second before you're charged the second penalty on taxes. For the classes 5, 6, 7, and 8, I think I said 4 earlier. We don't have a 4, but in the district of Sechelt. But for tax classes 5, 6, 7, and 8, their due date is still going to be July 2nd, but their first penalty date will be October 1st, 2020. And the second penalty date, of which both are going to be 5%, will be December 1st, 2020. So this is a change due to the current situation that our environment is in at this point. And we are budgeting less for penalty payments this year. And we're glad to be able to help the community. So in summary, property tax increase of 3.8% plus new construction. The district is anticipating a reduction in revenues in 2020. And as I described earlier, specifically for planning, building, and engineering, tax penalties as well. The district was in a plan to increase our taxes 3% for capital each year, cumulative. We are not doing that this year. So the 3.8% tax increase is for current expenses and current capital, not to put more money aside for capital down the road. We hope to bring that back again next year. Our capital and projects are going to be funded from taxation, from grants, reserves, surplus. Every opportunity we have, we're looking for grants. However, they don't always exist. Borrowing, we're looking at borrowing $245,000 over 5 years for equipment purchases. The district has or will be sitting on adjusting the property penalty dates for 2020. And the district is planning for anticipating that we may not receive a significant portion of our tax revenue by the property tax due date. And so staff are going to be putting what they call a revenue anticipation borrowing bylaw forward to council in case the revenues that we don't get in don't meet our expected expenses. One of the things that we do have is by early August, we have about $6.8 million that we have to pay out to other levels of government. And so we need to make sure that that our cash flow is in a situation that can be paid out. The province is holding off on us having to pay the school taxes this year, which will also help our cash flows. So we don't have to pay them in that first week or start to pay them in that first week of August. They're delaying that payment till later in December. So we will be able to hold those monies for approximately 5 to 6 months longer than we have in the past. And that's the end of my presentation. Thank you for listening.
And thank you, Director Douglas. We will now go to questions. I will be rotating between online questions, email, and we've actually got no one on the telephone line. Looks like everyone has joined just with their webcams. Just a reminder to try to limit your inquiries to one topic at a time. Of course, a respectful dialogue will be expected of all participants. If you need to gather more information on your question, we will make note of it and we'll be posting the response on our For the Record page. All the questions and answers that we do receive today will be posted publicly as well. Thank you again for joining us. Let's start with the raised hands. Were there any participants who wanted to speak to their question live verbally? Please use the raise hand feature at the bottom of your Zoom window if you would like to speak. Apologies for the noise in the background. There's a very noisy pump in the office I'm using. Seeing no raised hands, we can go to a question that we had received in the Q&A earlier this evening. The question was from the related to changes in spending in the general operating fund under the general government slide. I apologize, I was trying to find that number and I didn't see it. Director Douglas, are you familiar with this one?
Sure, what was the expense?
200,000 in the general operating fund. It was a grant / project budgeted for in the general category for 2020.
Yeah, so the grant was a provincial grant for 200,000 for fencing around a sensitive area in the Seashelf area.
Oh, for the Sea-Watch neighborhood.
Yes.
And that was funded by the province. Thank you.
Correct.
Seeing no other hands raised, we've also not received any email inquiries, so we'll go back to the Q&A. Another question we received was stated that you appear to be granting raises to staff and an increase in property taxes in a period when BC is experiencing a GDP drop of 6% and many of your residents are unemployed. Both of these areas should be decreasing. Oh, I apologize. It's not exactly a question. Would you like to speak to that one this evening?
Yeah, the district is we do have a collective agreement with our staff, and we would be in breach of that if we didn't follow the terms and conditions of the collective agreement. So that's why you may be seeing increases to wages, yeah.
Thank you. Again, seeing no hands raised and no other questions coming in by email, the next Q&A question is on the legal fees budget increasing by 50,000 in 2020. Are you able to speak to those details?
Which fees?
Legal fees.
Legal fees, legal fees are really an estimate from year to year. You kind of assess what cases you have going on, you assess what you see coming up, and you have to budget appropriately. And so our assessment is that our legal fees had to increase this year, and that's what we did.
Okay, thank you. Next is the logic behind the specific dates for the penalties. The penalties over the next few months are sorry if I'm mispronouncing that, under the circumstances as people are out of work. Was there a specific reason for those particular dates to be selected?
So the first thing we knew we needed to do was extend the penalty dates. The province put into play the October 1st for businesses. And we also knew we had $6.8 million that we have to push out to other levels of government by the first week of August. So we had to maintain one early penalty. It is on two of the classes. And so a 5% penalty on July 3rd. And then the second penalty date there, we matched with the second penalty for residents, we matched with the first penalty for business being on October 1st. And the second penalty date for business of December 1st was just to keep business motivated to pay their taxes prior to December 1st, because we have another $5 million plus needing to go out in December.
Okay, thank you. We still have no hands raised. Were there any final questions before we sign off for the evening? Oh, we've got another Q&A has popped up. How much do we expect to borrow to cover short-term cash shortfalls?
So the bylaw we're putting into play is in front of council for their review is a $12 million revenue anticipating borrowing bylaw. We really think that there's a good chance we won't need to use any of it, but we need to have it in case people do not pay and we have to make payments out.
Okay, thank you. Were there any other questions? Oh, another one. Oh, just a follow-up to that. How will such borrowing be repaid?
So revenue anticipation borrowing is only borrowing on revenues you've charged but have not received. So if you have to borrow 100,000 revenue anticipation, as soon as taxes come into that level, you're paying back the loan off. So it's not like a traditional loan. It's almost like a line of credit in some sorts, but it's the amount, and the amount you pay is based on what you get in taxation.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions for this session this afternoon? Seeing no hands raised and no additional question and answers, again, we've got no new emails coming into our council meetings mailbox or other information mailboxes. Seeing no questions, I believe we are ready to sign off for this evening. Thanks again to everybody who joined the meeting. I really appreciate all the questions, and thank you, Director Douglas, for a great presentation. We'll see you back at 6:30.
Yeah.